Hi everyone, welcome to QA Stack. Today we are going to see Playwright Framework Part 2, where we are going to see how do we automate API requests using Playwright. So in section 1 we have already created UI tests, wherein we created page folder and then we created tests under test folder. Now let me create a separate folder for API test. Within the test folder we are going to create API test under this. Let me create API test 1.spec.ts. Now I'm using this API available. I'm using this API available to demonstrate the get, how to handle get request using Playwright. This is a simple get request. It does not have any authentication, and these are the results it displays. So first of all, for automating requests, API requests, you need to use the fixture route. First of all, to automate API request, you need to use an import route from Playwright. Herein you can pass the route now. Here you need to define the URL you're going to hit. You have two options. Either you can define the base URL in Playwright config file, or you can also define the base URL in a separate file and load that file as a fixture. For simplicity, right now I'm demonstrating how you can define it within a test, and then I will share how you can import these base URLs from an environment file. So here, let me create a root context. So let's write our first API test using Playwright. I'm using this link to perform a GET request. So for API requests, you need to import request, test, and assertions from Playwright. Now let's write a test case. Verify get request. Now let's define a request context. So in request context, you need to define the base URL. You can either load it from an external file, config file, or you can provide it here as. Then if there are any other headers you'd like to mention, you can add it under extra HTTP headers. Right now, let's just go ahead, since it's a simple GET request, let's just go ahead with only base URL. Now, we need to hit GET request. So we have to define the endpoint inside the GET request. We can store the response in another object. Okay, maybe there is a typo. Let me correct this. Okay, now it's fine. Now it's whenever we are assigning an object a value, it's important to use the keyword await within an async block. Otherwise, we won't be able to assign the value. It will throw a compile time error. Whenever you're going to initialize objects, you have to use await, because all the operations in Playwright are async. If you do not provide await, it will not wait to initialize that object. It will proceed forward. So hence it does not allows us to declare any object and initialize any object without using the keyword await. Now, so this is the response. Now let's verify the status code for this response. So for response, we can simply do response.status, and then we can check it what we are expecting. Here in this case, we are expecting it to be 200. Now let's just execute it once. npx playwright test. I just want to execute this one, so I'm going to pass the name as well. API test1 spec.ts. So we have run this test case. It says it's passed. Now let's try to print the status code as well, just to see whether it's actually fetching it or not. So now it is printing 200. Now let's say we want to verify, or we want to print these values as well. Let's say title we want to print. So now you see in this books, currently the body returns an array of books, multiple books. So in order to handle an array, we will first have to capture the response body by doing rep.json. This returns the body of the response. Now we have to fetch the books from it. books equals to body dot books. Now we are going to do for each book of books. Now don't forget to use await, otherwise you'll keep getting these errors. We need to print the name of the book or title of the book. Now let's run it again. Now you see it has printed the status code, and it is also giving the name of the book's print, Git Pocket Guide Learning JavaScript. So this will be useful when you have to verify the response against certain values. Now let's see another case where we need to provide an additional header. So if you have to provide an additional header along with the base URL, you can provide that under extra HTTP header. So here you can provide, let's say I want to pass the authorization, then you can pass it as token like this. You have to pass content type. You can pass like this. Now if you run this, it will utilize all these headers. Let me run it. Since we are not using any authentication, this request will pass even if we provide it or do not provide it an authorization token. Now let's consider a case wherein you have to do a post call. Let's try to see. Let's try to hit this create user post call. So let's create a test, create user request. Again, we need to define a request context. Request.new context. Herein we have to define the base URL, which would be this. It has no authorization, no major headers, only body. So now once the request context is created, we can get the response using post. In post, first you'll have to define the URL which you're going to hit or the endpoint which you're going to hit, and then you have to provide the body in the form of data. here you can use JSON dot stringify method to stringify this screen, to stringify this value. So this is, after fixing the errors, this is the final response. Now let me print the status code. That's it. Status code. Now let's try to run this. Okay. So let's run it. So it says 406. Let's try to see the message also. Response dot body dot message. So as we can clearly see, So since we can already see that the user is existing, let's try to create a unique user and see if we are getting a success response. So it's 201, which states the request is successfully created. Now if we do a get user details, we might be able to get the details. First of all, let's see how to print the response body. Let's create a new user. Let's create a unique user. So we can maybe print the user ID to validate if the response is success or not. And await, expect, body dot user ID dot to be defined. Still, let's just print the entire response. Okay, now let's run it. So here it is giving you an error because we are trying to create already existing user, which will not give a success state. So that's why it is giving an error. Okay. Now let's try to create a new user. This time it should give a success. You see it's giving 201, then this is the logs it is printing, and then it's passing both these assertions. So this is how we can automate a post request as well.